and gentlemen, can you believe it? I have genuinely hurt myself there, but we're going to press on anyway because we want to talk about gaming PCs, and these are videos where we go through the very best price points and we talk about the best components at those price points to help you get the dream gaming PC. But this one is a little bit different because unless you've been living under a rock the last couple of months, you'll know that there are some new GPUs out there, but they're not necessarily the must-buys that a lot of people were hoping for. I mean, we've almost had the full refresh, everything all the way from the RTX 4090 down to the RTX 4060. That's one of those cards that isn't exactly so popular. AMD has joined the party, very good at the top end, but the 7600 is potentially worth buying, but at the moment the pricing is probably still a little bit too high. So let's discuss absolutely everything you need to know and get you a brand new gaming PC right after a short word from this video sponsor. Corsair's IQ Link is here to revolutionize your gaming PC. This brand new ecosystem stops cable clutter in its tracks, with interconnecting components removing the need for endless cables and giving you more control over your PC than ever before. Grab some interlocking QX RGB fans for dual light loop beauty, an H150i IQ Link cooler for next level CPU thermals, and connect up to a whopping 14 devices to a single IQ system hub. Learn more today with the link down below. Right then, let's waste absolutely no time at all and get started. And we're going to begin at the budget end. And there's always a few different ways you can go. I mean, budget obviously means different things to different people. I'm kind of waiting for the new AMD APUs to come out, and then that will be really easy to recommend for like a $400 or $500 gaming PC. But as the cost of graphics cards themselves have actually come down, I would usually start by looking at the used market for, I was going to say new GPU, but a new for you GPU. We love pre-loved. So let's have a look and see what we got. Something like the RX 6600 is probably going to be a decent bet. And you can see even new, you can get this for around about £200 now, which is pretty awesome. But I'm thinking if you can get one for nearer the £140, £150 mark, that is quite literally a steal. I mean, again, okay, it's not literally a steal, but you get the point. I mean, look, straight out the gate, here you have one already for £150, which is pretty cool, but they've got best offer on, so you might be able to get this for less. We've got bids at about £104. I mean, if it's buy it now £150, I think £140, maybe £135 is a pretty good bet. So we're going to assume £140. I'm going to go with this. But then of course we need to do the rest of the PC, and we're going to do some of our shopping on Overclockers, then I'm going to move over to Newegg for you lovely guys in the US, then we're going to move back to the high end with Scan UK. And after picking our GPU, the thing I always want to move on to next is going to be the CPU or the processor. And I assure you that no matter what your allegiance is, whether it's Team Red or Team Blue, it is definitely always worth having a close look at both sets of CPUs so you can get an idea of pricing, work out performance, and then choose what's going to be best for you. I mean, it's a little bit tricky at the moment because AM5 definitely does have better upgrades, but then Intel could be a little bit cheaper, which if you're looking to do a budget-friendly gaming PC, obviously makes a whole lot more sense. I mean, let's have a look at our Ryzen 7000 CPUs, shall we? The cheapest one we have is the Ryzen 5 7600. We've used this loads and loads of times. It is fantastic. Meanwhile, over on the Intel side of things, looking at the current generation, you've got the i5 13400F for £200. It's not a bad option. It's certainly worth considering, but I still think that's potentially a little bit more expensive than it should be. But you do also have the Core i3, and if you are looking to save as much money as possible, this is a solid option, but it is only 4 core. You could of course also look at used CPUs. This is a good way to go potentially if you're looking to save yourself some money. Or actually, if you go all the way down to the bottom, you've got the i3 12100F. Crucially, this is available for £90. But I think for our budget build, this is actually going to be the way to go. We're going to look at our £90 CPU that actually comes with a CPU cooler in the box as well, so we don't have to buy that. And yes, 4 cores is not going to be the most future-proof thing out there, but with a 6600, I still think this is going to be fine for what most people are looking for. And obviously there's less upgradability in terms of future products, but there's no reason you can't grab an i5, i7, maybe even an i9 CPU in a couple of years' time, again on the used market, and your whole PC can level up that way. I think this is a nice little starting point as long as you're willing to accept you're not going to have this CPU forever. And then let's move on to our motherboard. We'll look at both B760 and B660. B660 is the previous generation, but we've got a previous generation CPU that can go in either, so you don't really need to worry about BIOS updates or anything at the moment. B660M from Asus Prime. That's got Wi-Fi, £130, not bad, but can we do any better? And as we probably expected, no. I mean, the motherboards themselves actually aren't too bad. AM5 boards can get really expensive. They are starting to come down quite a lot, which is nice, but obviously something like this, you can use DDR4 memory as well, which is cheaper. And if you're saving money on the board, the whole platform as a whole comes down. You get a cheaper PC. I would say it is worth spending the extra £5 to step up to B760 if you can. You get slightly better bandwidth on that newer chipset. I think this actually has 2.5 gig Ethernet versus 1. Probably not going to affect most people, but as you'd expect, this should be a better board than the previous generation. So let's add this to our basket, and then let's move on to cases, because this is something that is always pretty exciting. We do have a micro ATX motherboard, so we do need to look at micro ATX cases. And obviously we're looking for something that is £50 or less. So once again, we're sort by price ascending. So let's have a look at this, the Colink Citadel Mesh. And this is one that you can actually buy a more premium version that comes with RGB fans, I believe, as well. We've not used this one on the channel before. We actually should get this in because it's one that I really like the look of. It pretty much does everything that you need it to do, really. I imagine it's not going to be the absolute best built case in the world, but for £52, it pretty much has everything you need. So we're going to go with this, but I will caution you that we haven't used this particular case on the channel before, but this is something that I'm looking to change. We also, of course, need some memory or some RAM. This one being DDR4, as it's a DDR4 motherboard. Please don't buy the wrong RAM for the wrong board. And here is what we have, sorted by price ascending, and all of the bigger names you're looking at about £50, £55. But this is for 16 gigabytes of memory, and I think there is a clear winner here for our budget rig. This is Lexar Hades. It doesn't have RGB. You can spend like an extra £12 or so to get that if you want. But this is actually a 3600 megahertz kit, which is nice to have a little bit extra speed. But for $37.99, clearly this one's a steal. We will, of course, also need some SSD storage, and this really has come down in price massively over the last few years. I mean, you could even get 1 terabyte drive now for barely any money at all. It's pretty awesome. Oh, and this one's actually a bit tricky. I mean, obviously it's entirely up to you. You can get a terabyte of storage for £44, or you can save yourself a tenner and only get 500. I think this is a no-brainer, go for 1 terabyte, but obviously if every penny really matters, then you can get the 500 and just buy another SSD at a later date. And at this stage, we've pretty much got everything we need with the exception of a power supply. And we don't need anything crazy here, but obviously if you do want to upgrade your graphics card at a later date, you don't want to have to upgrade your power supply as well necessarily. So it's worth spending a little bit more if you can, but again, for a budget-friendly rig, this isn't a necessity. Just buy one from a decent, respectable brand. So let's have a look what we have on offer. Well, we've got our Colinks and our Aerocores at the cheaper end, which are probably going to be fine, but if I was building it myself, I'd look for something from a name, I guess, more like Corsair or Be Quiet. This is a power supply that I've used myself in the 450 flavor. It's not the best power supply, but I've not had any issues with it really. I mean, I overloaded my 450 once and the whole thing shut down, but that's going to happen with any power supply, that is to be expected. So let's use the CV550 and then take a look at our basket. Make sure we have everything. We have our motherboard, CPU, RAM, cooler comes inside the box as well. And then of course, last but certainly not least, we need our graphics cards that we're assigning £140 for, which now means I need to do some quick maths. That comes in at £560, which is pretty darn cool, bearing in mind only a few years ago, something like a 6600 GPU might be selling for like £400, £450. Like, it was crazy times. And while, again, this isn't going to be the best rig, it's not going to be able to play every game at max settings, especially at 1080p, I think you're going to be really surprised with just how much performance that we've actually got in this. I'll show you some footage now of the previous time that we actually built a RX 6600 rig. It had a slightly better CPU, but as you can see from the gameplay, it was really, really impressive. And whilst this is going to bottleneck you in certain situations, as I say, just keep it for a bit, get started, and if you are finding that you're running into CPU bottlenecks in the games that you actually want to play, because it's not going to be all of them, then by all means step up to something like a used i5 or i7 in maybe a few months or a year's time or something, and you can grab yourself a bargain. But I think it's now time to move on to our mid-range build, and we're going to aim for a price point of $1,000, which I think is going to be easier said than done, but I'm up for the challenge. And of course, as we're aiming for $1,000, we're going to be using Newegg, and we're going to be shopping in USD. And of course, as with all of these rigs, we're going to start by choosing our GPU, as this is pretty much the best way to set your budget. And at this price point, you typically have a few main options. You've got the RTX 4060, the RTX 3060 Ti from the previous generation, and then the new RX 7600. But the issue with pretty much all of these is that the pricing is just a little bit too high, and they only have 8 gigabytes of VRAM. I would wager that actually going for the previous generation of AMD at the moment is going to make the largest amounts of cents. But we'll add all of these cards to this little filter, and then everything should start to become clear. So here you have the RX 6750 XT. It's on sale at the moment for $360, and this has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. In terms of Team Green, you do have the 3060 Ti for $355, which is a brilliant price compared to what we've had, but that 8 gigabyte limitation I think is going to put a lot of people off, which interestingly brings us towards this, the RX 6700 XT, not the 50, and this is available for $320. And I think this is probably going to be the way to go for most people at this sort of price point. I mean, if you can step up to the 50, fantastic, but I'm not sure whether we're going to be able to get that in within the $1,000 budget. I'm sure you can, but you might have to cut some corners. So maybe this is one that we're going to come back to, but for now, we'll add this to our basket. We are, of course, also going to need a CPU, and here I am going to suggest that we look at Ryzen CPUs, because you can go for the i5, but again, the sort of upgrade path I think is so much better on this. We're now starting to talk about a PC that can be upgraded quite a lot, and I think going for this 7600 is going to make more sense than going for the i5, unless you need loads more cores for loads of different things at the same time. That's when you can consider the i5, but I think most people are going to want to look at the Ryzen 5 7600. This one is currently $227. If you do want to step up to the 7700, you're actually looking at quite a lot more, and I think this is where the Intel i5 would come in, because it sort of sandwiches itself between the two. So don't rule out Intel, just be aware that AM5 is clearly the better platform, to be honest. Speaking of the platform, we will of course need a motherboard to get this to function, and here we're specifically looking at B650 and B650E. There's no point stepping up to the more expensive X670 unless you need the extra bandwidth. It's not going to help you with gaming, and the prices can quite literally go through the roof. We've got this really cool live mixer for $170. We've actually just got one of these in, and we will be doing a build with this shortly, which would be pretty interesting. I mean, you've got the Prime B650 Plus, but this one is pretty bare bones. It's nice that you've got some decent cooling for the VRMs, but that is kind of it, which does kind of leave us with the live mixer. This is not going to be to everybody's tastes now, is it? But you've got loads of I/O on this, and as long as it's capable of delivering the right power and the right cooling for the CPU, no issue from me. Just be aware that this one does not have Wi-Fi, which could be a deal breaker. We will also need to grab ourselves some DDR5 memory. Once again, going for something that's not crazy overkill. You've got some G-Skill Flare here for $95, but it does not look the absolute best. Whereas you have this 5600 MHz kit for $102, and that's some RGB. But I think we have ourselves a winner. Here we go, $105 for 32 gigabytes of G-Skill Trident Z5 Expo 6000 MHz. And as we've already mentioned, all of these components, it's always hard to say like 100% compatibility. Sometimes you have some weird things like maybe the memory profile doesn't work and the board needs a BIOS update. You can usually get there in the end, but for best compatibility, it is better to have an Expo kit and a I forgot the word AMD then, an AMD motherboard and XMP kit for an Intel, but you can mix and match and you should still get it to work. But I mean, go with Expo. I'm confusing you. Go with Expo for AMD. Let's move on now to storage and see if we can save ourselves some money here. I do want to get 1 terabyte, but I don't want to spend a crazy amount of money. If it can be Gen 4, that would also be great. There you go, look, no brainer. Samsung 980 Pro, 1 terabyte, $50. $50! I did like a sponsored video on this when they first came out, like, what was it, 2.5 years ago? And I think you had to pay like 160, 170 pounds or something for this. And what, you can get it for $50 now? Madness. We of course also need to grab ourselves a case. We really can't spend too much money on this, unfortunately. This one from Deepcool. I'm not sure if we've used this exact one before, but we've used one very similar. $55. Doesn't have USB-C on the front though. We could look at this. The Meshify 2 Compact. This one should be okay, it's just not the absolute longest, so obviously make sure the exact GPU that you're getting will fit in this. This is a solid bet. So let's add this one to our basket for $70. And then we've got $60 for our power supply. And when we first need to know how much wattage we actually need, it's recommended for 650 watts. So we need a 650 watt supply. I mean, there's one from Montech actually, and this is definitely an up and coming brand. It's 80 plus gold rated for efficiency, and it's currently on sale for $70. Haven't used this one. Again, emphasis on have not used this one. It's also non-modular. Oh, you can spend slightly more. If you spend $90, you can get it with modularity, which is the way I would go. We'll add this one to our basket, and then let's have a look at the pricing. $1,035. I mean, yes, I know, technically speaking, we have failed. But I mean, you could change the case, wouldn't recommend that. That would easily get you to $1,000. Maybe go for the slightly cheaper motherboard, take a little bit off everything. But realistically, I think it's probably the RAM is the thing that you could go for 16 gigabytes, or maybe drop the speed, or probably just drop the RGB lighting, and you could get this down to that magical $1,000 price point. Overall, I think this is a pretty cool rig actually, and I know there has been an omission that some of you are probably thinking, hang on.
He's missed a component here.
I know there's no CPU cooler, but this is precisely the point that I say in a lot of my videos. There's no point in overspending now and getting a third-party CPU cooler if you don't have it in the budget. The 7600 will come with not the best cooler, but surprisingly for a stock cooler, not terrible. CPU cooler inside the box that is worth using, and then yeah, just in a month's time upgrade it to something and you can make your rig look better and more importantly quieter, and the CPU will probably actually perform a little bit better as the clocks could be a bit higher. But I think it's time to move on to something that is going to be so dramatic that every time you have friends over they will go,
"What on earth is that?"
The ultimate behemoth PC-centric rig. Let's do it. And for this, we're going to once again sail across the sea all the way to good old Blasey, and we're going to start with our GPU, and they actually already know what we want, the RTX 4090. And say what you will about Nvidia, about their pricing, about the way that they've been going about things for the last year, the simple fact of the matter is the RTX 4090 is a beast, and it pretty much crushes any game, any resolution, any setting. I mean, obviously there are always going to be limitations, but actually most of the time when you're using this, it is going to be on your CPU, regardless of whether you want to do like ray tracing, high-end multiplayer gaming. You do find that there are certain titles, mainly actually being Warzone, where you can't extract absolutely everything out of this that you want. The main downside, of course, is going to be the price, as this is quite literally insane. I mean, we're about to look at that, but it is about £1,600, which is frankly extortionate. But if you want the very best and you're willing to spend whatever it takes to get there, this is the card for you. Just try and get like a power adapter instead of using this horrible thing that comes inside the box. Right, let's have a look. What do we have? Today only deal! £50 off, only £1,600 now! I am of course being a little bit ironic, but this is actually the card I've been using myself. This is the PNY 4090, and as I say, it crushes pretty much everything, 4K 120Hz gaming. That's actually the one that I use. So unless there are some better deals out there, I think it's safe to go for the PNY. Tried and tested, baby. I mean, I now realise that we're basically just copying my rig that I actually use, because when it comes to the CPU, it's also the same one that I use, that I've actually personally bought for myself. That's how much I like it. The Ryzen 7 7800X3D. I mean, let's make no bones about it. This is the best CPU for gaming out there right now. I mean, it is only 8 cores, so it's not the absolute most powerful thing in the world, but it has some 3D V-cache and all of the cores are properly accelerated to use it, which just means that games that like a small amount of faster cores get all of the information that they want super quick, and they can just pump out those serious frames. It is pretty incredible to use this. Oh look, you get 2 free items, including the Gunnar Dual Onyx UK/Blue Light filter glasses worth £35. Let's have a look at motherboards, and we are going to go over balls to the wall all out. I mean, we don't need to go crazy stupid just for the sake of it, but we definitely do want some advanced features. You've got the Aorus Master, look. We've been using this, I think, for all of our benchmarks, actually. It's been working pretty well. Strix is okay, Carbon's okay, but actually, I think let's go with the Gigabyte. Look at this. We've got 3 products, and the rig is already more expensive than everything else that we've done today by a factor of 2. Let's book ourselves out some DDR5 memory. We'll go for 6000 megahertz. There we go, £219. We'll go with that, but it is definitely worth considering going for 48 gigabytes actually, because this is still more than you need for gaming, and it is going to save you some money. Let's now look at SSDs. We'll go for PCIe Gen 5. I'm actually drawn to this one by Corsair, the MP700. You will need decent cooling, so I think the Master should actually be okay for Gen 5 SSDs, but please make sure you don't cook these things. They get stupidly hot. Cheaper motherboards, I'm looking at you. Let's have a look at cooling though. What do we need? Well, we're gonna go for an all-in-one liquid cooler, and we're gonna get one that is 360mm. I mean, these ones from Thermaltake here, £100. That's definitely worth considering. And I mean, to be fair, you could spend loads of money on your cooling, but I've actually used the LS720 a couple of times I think now, and I've been really happy with it. Deepcore are one of those brands that you don't always think about, but actually their products, especially the coolers, are pretty darn good. I mean, the fans aren't going to be the absolute best, but if you are going to swap them out later anyway to sort of match all of your fans, I don't see why you shouldn't go for this. $109.98, solid option. add it to our basket. We are also, of course, going to need a power supply, and while 850 I think is the minimum, I would go with 1,000 or higher personally with a 4090. Gives you plenty of expandability. Let's have a look what we've got. But here we've got a 1000 watt Be Quiet Straight Power 11 that's platinum rated for 199, and I really love the Be Quiet power supplies. I think they're fantastic. So let's go with this one and then move on to what will hopefully be the final component, the case. Cases, view all. We're gonna go with something big. Corsair 7000D, that thing is massive. Recommend it if you want massive, but I don't want massive. I mean, why don't we just stick with Fractal? I mean, I've used this case and I thought it was fantastic. Granted, I did go for the one that comes with RGB fans standard, but this XL version just has so much space in it. If you want to do like a liquid cooled build, you want to get a 4090 that's going to be massive, these sorts of things, it's a solid case. And at £190, it is definitely worth considering. And at this stage, the only other thing that we really need to add are some extra fans if you want some RGB flair to spice things up. And the ones that I really like at the moment are actually from Lee, but they're not sold here on scan, which is a bit annoying. So if we go back over to Overclockers, we search for Lee Uni fans, we should find that you can buy a 3-pack. So here we have the SL120s for $56.99, and you can buy an extra one here for another $16, which is pretty cool. That comes to £73 for all of our extra fans, 3 on the front, 1 on the back, and we just use the ones that come with the cooler. It's not really the end of the world. You can sync them up on your motherboard. That should bring us to a grand total of £3,525. If that's not a bargain, I don't know what is. And this is pretty much why PC gaming can be so intimidating for a lot of people, because they see this and they think, oh, well, PC gaming is ridiculously expensive, I can't afford that, don't want anything to do with it. But obviously, there are so many different levels, as we've shown. We've started with a gaming PC that was, what, about £550, £600, something like that, and it can go all the way up to this. This is clearly the better gaming PC, but this is massively overkill. Even if you just wanted a 4090, you could cut back on so many other things and you wouldn't see any difference in performance whatsoever. But if we want to have a bit of fun and we want to build
the Behemoth Ultimate Gaming PC 2023,
this is what you're essentially going to be looking at. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think of my rigs? Is there something that I've missed, or do you think I've hit the nail on the head? Which cases, which components would you use? Please let me know down in the comment section below. If you do want to check out current pricing on anything featured in this video, this is the bit that takes me ages to do all the links, but I'll do it for you. I'll link them all listed down below with my Amazon affiliate links, because price is always changing. Obviously, you don't necessarily need to buy all of this. You can mix and match it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Smash the like button if you enjoyed this. Get yourself subscribed. And I've now missed the clean segue into today's sponsor. Just roll it anyway, Carl. And of course, while you're down there, why not bask in the beauty of Corsair's new IQ Link? This smart ecosystem eliminates those pesky RGB and fan cables from your system, allowing you to stack RGB devices with a smile. All the devices can be automatically set up and configured in iCUE with some exclusive effects, and the new QX RGB fans even have a temperature sensor inside them for monitoring air temps. Get yours today with the link down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. We'll catch you in the next one.